Já estamos online. Boa noite a todos e a todas do YouTube, do Facebook, de onde você estiver vendo a gente. Bem-vindo e bem-vindas ao Climb Talk. Climb Talk é o espaço de entrevistas da revista Blog de Escalada. E semanalmente a gente traz uma pessoa aqui para que ela fale o que ela acha de determinado tema e para que ele esclareça o máximo possível dentro do expertise dela. Hoje a gente vai fazer uma outra entrevista em inglês, dessa vez com John Burgman. John Burgman, you're welcome. Thank you very much for accept our invitation. And please present yourself to our public.
Yeah, thanks, Lucho. Nice to see you again. We did this. Some people that are tuning in might have seen me when we did an Instagram live session a year ago. But it's good to be back with you talking here on YouTube. My name is John Burgman. I write about competition climbing. I report on competition climbing for a number of different climbing magazines. I'm a senior editor at Climbing Business Journal, which is an American publication that kind of covers the climbing gym scene and the climbing gym industry. And I wrote a book called High Drama, which is a history of the American competition climbing scene.
Yeah, that's cool. Before we get into our subject today, how was the whole process for you wrote your book? Because it's not simple write a book. You have to do several research, you have to interview several persons, and sometimes you have to, I don't know, approach some kind of subject everyone wants to hide. So how was the amount of work you get for write your book?
It was definitely a lot of work. Fortunately, there was never really a time when it felt not enjoyable, because the whole book was written because I was curious about the subject myself. I wanted to know more about the history of the sport that I was covering, the sport of competition climbing that I was reporting on. And so I would just kind of dive into it in magazine articles and internet articles and whatnot. And I found that there just really wasn't that much history available, certainly not that much history available in book form. So, you know, the old saying is kind of write the book that you would want to read. And this was certainly, that was the case with my book. I mean, it took a long time. I think in total, from the time I kind of had the idea and started the initial research to actually publishing the book was probably about 4 or 5 years, maybe something like that. So yeah, I mean, it was researching, it was reaching out to people, it was doing interviews and kind of trying to put the whole narrative together in a cohesive thread. But it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the process.
Cool. And how was the reception of your book with the person who are portrayed by your book? They get angry, they get, I don't know, so they just don't read the book. How was it?
I haven't luckily had anybody that told me that they were angry. Mainly I wanted the book to be a celebration of the history. So I would be surprised if anybody was truly angry, although, you know, you never know. But in terms of the reception of the book, it's interesting because the book was released in March of last, March of whatever, 10, I guess 14 months ago, whatever that is, something like that. And so it was released right around the time that the pandemic was happening here in the United States, right around the time the pandemic was really starting, actually kind of like the same week. And so as a result, the country here in the United States, everything kind of shut down, and my book and all the promotion that was planned of that was part of that. I had book signings that were canceled and or postponed and then eventually canceled, and I had some press stuff that I was going to do that got canceled. So it didn't end up having the release that I had planned or hoped for the book, but it seems to have kind of developed a sort of grassroots following that I'm appreciative of. I know a lot of people, some people messaged me during the pandemic and they said that it was kind of their reading material. They found it during the pandemic, and while they were stuck at home, they were enjoying it and stuff. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, this is awesome. And you are also a journalist and write for Climbing Magazine and mainly for Climbing Business Journal. How how was the idea about write something very specific on climbing? Climbing is not so that big, but it's bigger than 10 years ago. And seems you have subject every day. This is amazing. How came the idea for, well, let's talking about the climbing business?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start the climbing business journal, so I can't really speak to its reason for being founded. But I can say that, I mean, I think that the realization was, or that there's a very robust industry that pertains specifically to the gym scene and climbing gyms. That is very, there's certainly a lot of crossover, but it is separate from the outdoor industry, the outdoor climbing industry in some ways as well. Even more so when you're talking about kind of the components that go into a climbing gym in terms of the facility and the padded flooring and the plastic, the handholds and the footholds and the construction of the walls and all that. Like, that is a very that's a very kind of unique aspect that obviously the outdoor climbing industry doesn't really deal with it at all. And so I think that there was just kind of this awareness of there needs to be a media that really focuses on this specifically and highlights the things that are happening with this type of stuff. And so I think that's why it was founded, and also just to kind of provide some data to all of that stuff. And so that's kind of the push behind Climbing Business Journal that continues to this day.
That's awesome. And let's start our subject, our competition. How you see the evolution of climbing competition from 2006, 2007 until today? With your, we are, I don't know, 2 months or around 2 months to beginning our premiere, if everything is going with the planet, our premiere on TOQUIO. How you see the evolution from our climbing competition?
Yeah, it's evolved in a lot of ways. I think you almost have to decide, are you talking about the evolution of it in terms of like the media coverage of it? Are you talking about the evolution of the climbing style and the route setting style of it? Or are you kind of talking about the evolution of the way that competitions are organized? Because all of those have changed.
Yes,
either significant. Yeah,
let's
all three.
begin to organize.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think one of the most obvious ways is if you look back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of times the idea for even the biggest climbing competitions was that they would be held in gyms, right? In climbing gyms, because that obviously makes sense. There's a built-in audience there. There's a built-in fan base. I think steadily what we're seeing is competitions are going outside of the kind of confines of the climbing gym. That's not to say that they never did that before 10 years ago. Obviously they did. And that's not to say that there aren't still significant competitions that take place in climbing gyms. There obviously are. Case in point was the Pan American Championships that just happened earlier last year or whatever. But I think going forward, we're starting to see a trend where climbing competitions are being held more frequently and with more regularity in larger venues, places like community centers that can be turned into real viable sports centers, facility centers. And I think that's new. And I think that, frankly, that's going to continue. I think we're going to see organizations and competition organizers continue to try to bring climbing out of the gyms and into other sports venues that can hold larger audiences, frankly.
Cool. And the main difference between the organization on Europe and here on the whole America, North, Center, and South, it's because here on the whole America continent, we usually organize events, organize championships on gyms because we don't have some kind of, I don't know, money for doing the same stuff they doing on Europe with on a city, on a stadium, with the public on the park or something like that. Why we have some kind this difference between Europe and here on America?
I think there are probably a couple reasons. I think one of them, let's not forget that climbing competitions, in the sense that we know them, right? These big international events that draw competitors from all around the world, those began in Europe, right? In kind of the mid 1980s. So and they didn't really start happening in the United States until the late 80s. And then it didn't really even take off in terms of like regular climbing circuits until later than that. So I think there's just a heritage in Europe, if nothing else, that we here in the United States, and it sounds like maybe in South America as well, we don't have that. I also think here in the United States, for climbing and for the climbing industry, the aspect of it that is glorified and by whatever you want to say, by the sponsors or by the media, that is still largely outdoor climbing, right? Outdoor climbing still largely gets the attention. And in a lot of ways, outdoor climbing is where the money lies for the climbers themselves. They can go out, they can do a really hard outdoor route, and they can parlay that into sponsorship or into promotion, self-promotion, and ultimately income. More so than they can by winning, competitions, frankly. And so I think it's kind of the logical answer, but I think part of it is it's just because outdoors is where a lot of the American attention lies, as opposed to indoors, as opposed to the comp scene.
I understood. And talking about style, because this is a very polemic. Some people raise rant about this new style because it's comparing with parkour. This is no sense because it's not parkour. And your opinion, how you see this evolution of style? Because before was very similar with the rock climbing, and now it's a kind of show with balance. It's like a very soft ninja warrior.
I love it. I love the evolution. I love where competition climbing is. I want it to go even more beyond what it is now. Now, I'm not saying I want it to go so far that it loses kind of the integrity of climbing or the heart and soul of climbing. I know that those are intangible concepts, but I do think that it's going in a good direction, because competition climbing should separate itself aesthetically and stylistically from outdoor climbing, going back to what we were just talking about. If you really want to have a separation between outdoor climbing and indoor climbing and competition climbing, they need that separate stylistic feel and look and different training and all of that. Otherwise, competition climbing is just always going to be seen as this thing that's almost like pseudo outdoor climbing, but not quite. It's like fake outdoor climbing, right? Mm-hmm. If the style and what we're trying to do in competitions is just mimic outdoor climbing, really, then what you have is a product it's like not as good as outdoor climbing, right?
It's like make some kind of competition of people running on treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, I mean, if you think about it, what would you rather watch? Somebody, you know, run an exciting race outside, or just somebody running on a treadmill? Obviously, you're going to want it's so. I do think it's great that there's some stylistic and aesthetic difference between competition climbing and outdoor climbing. I hope it continues. There's a fine line, admittedly. Like, you don't want it to go too far in that direction where it's just complete spectacle. But I have a real hard time understanding and validating or understanding any criticism. Whenever people criticize the parkour style, my refrain is always like, well, are you just wanting indoor climbing to mimic outdoor climbing? Because if that's the case, then indoor climbing and competition climbing are never going to grow, you know, to their fullest extent. There's always going to be that ceiling there where it's like, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as outdoor climbing.
Yes, probably. And the cover of the media, because 10 years ago, we don't have smartphones. We had YouTube, but now YouTube it's more stronger than ever. And we have streaming media. Even the IFFC has the own media. And we have more space for climbers on the news, probably United States here now, but we have more on climbing, on advertising. We have more climbing on television. We have more visibility. That means on the future, on midterm or long term, we have more people practicing climbing. This is awesome. So how you see the evolution of the cover of the media with some fanatics like me on you on 10 years ago, and now we have, I don't know, 1,000 fanatics like us.
It's great. Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps create kind of that grassroots foundation. I think you need both, right? I think for the sport to be really viable, ideally what you want to have is you want to have that grassroots level of those fans basically that are creating content on their own. And some of them are doing it, you know, quite well. But then you also want to have, for lack of a better word, like mainstream media covering climbing. If you look here in the United States, if I think about the media that covers something like basketball or something like American football or even soccer, right? It's like there's ESPN, there's Sports Illustrated, but then there's also NBC Sports, ABC Sports, CBS Sports, you know, the Associated Press. Those entities haven't really gotten into covering climbing yet, competition climbing. I think they should. I think they need to. And I think that is the ultimate goal, to have kind of like this robust upper level media, and then to also have the grassroots people that are doing stuff on their own and making great content on YouTube, on Instagram, all that stuff.
Yes. As the working on climbing business journal, do you have some kind of information about the audience on ESPN? Because if I'm not wrong, ESPN bought the rights for broadcasting the climbing competition on United States. And do you know if this kind of broadcasting, it is getting more audience, it's the poor audience, or it's a black box?
You know, I don't know. I haven't had extensive conversations with USA Climbing or ESPN about any of that. I don't know the inner workings. I do know the deal was it was a multi-year deal partnership between USA Climbing and ESPN. And to people that are watching in South America that might not know, what that basically meant is that the national championships, bouldering and you know, lead and the combined and all that stuff in the United States, they were broadcast on you could watch them on ESPN's like streaming channel on the internet, and then you could watch them rebroadcasted on TV in an edited form. So they weren't on YouTube like they had been in the past. It was a multi-year partnership. I from what I've heard, that the viewership was just kind of even better than they expected, or better than they hoped for this initial partnership. I think I don't want to speak for them, but from what I hear, I think that both sides were really pleased with the partnership. Obviously, I can't be definitive on that because I don't know, but it seems to be it seemed to be well received, and I don't know what will happen in the future. I don't know, anything about the partnership going forward or whatever, but yeah, it seems to be something that was a positive here in the United States.
Okay, so the main question, it is in Portuguese on the screen right now.
Yep.
What we can expect on Olympics on Tokyo? What do you expect? We will see the new. Did you watch it out my live with the guy last week
with Tyler?
Yes, with Tyler.
I did. Yeah.
Yes, I make some kind of very strong comparing, but for me it is true. Janja Gambret will be the name of gymnastic from Romania on the
I wanted
70s.
to ask you about that. Nadia Comaneci. I wanted to ask you because here was my question when you said that with Tyler. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no.
You reminded me of this. So Nadia Comaneci, she was really famous for getting the perfect 10, right? That was like her historic moment. So when you compared Janja to her, the equivalent of the perfect 10 in the combined format would be winning speed, winning lead, and winning bouldering, right? That would be like the perfect. Do you think Janja could win all three disciplines?
Well, everyone can do something. But I think Janja will impress everyone with the same way Nadia Comaneci impressed at the time.
I see.
Because she will do something anyone never saw on the planet before, and will be on Japan with only audience from Japan. And climbing is the fourth or third more popular sports on Japan. So reporters and journalists from every place of the world will see the reaction from the public, from the journalists on Japan, with the Janja probably winning with so gracefully and easily with the same way she do on every competition. And because of that, I think Janja will impress everyone because of that. The impact on anyone who don't know the sport will looking for more information about the sport and the athlete. In this case, Janja.
I wouldn't argue with that. I mean, Janja is certainly, she's considered the favorite going into the Olympics, rightly so, right? She's done things that has been historic and unprecedented on the World Cup circuit. The only thing that I think is the big X factor, and the thing that makes it difficult to kind of fully hang your hat on the idea of Janja doing what Janja does and performing flawlessly, is the speed discipline, right? Because the speed discipline, look, everybody's human, everybody stumbles, right? And yet in the speed discipline, one fall or one stumble, and it can be the difference between placing 4th or placing 19th or something like that, right?
Yes.
And it's almost like in the blink of an eye, what seems so certain going into it, oh yeah, Janja's going to just be Janja, she's going to be amazing. It's like all it takes is just one split second in the speed discipline. You know, she zigs when she should have zagged or whatever. And all of a sudden, rather than being in a comfortable favorite position, Janja might be heading into the bouldering discipline being in like last place or something like that, right? And in which case, if she's last, even if she performs really, really well, it might not be enough for her to overcome that one stumble, that one little mistake in speed climbing that cost her everything.
But Janja didn't do it the same thing me and you do it on pandemics. That means Yanya don't stay on home watching Netflix. Yanya was training. Yeah, you know, Yanya is like, it's like, it's like a blonde Michael Jordan, blonde female Michael Jordan. They stay and training with a very high competitive spirit, and it's Yanya. She get there because she's a special person, and because of that, I know Yanya will not get last on speed.
Yeah,
probably will not get the first, but will not get the last.
And I'm certainly not. I'm not here to make a case for that something is going to happen and Yanya's going to get last in speed. I only say that that it's
everything can happen.
Yeah, exactly, right. And the Olympic history is full of instances where the favorite going into it, something happens and they don't end up performing well, and a new star is made or something like that. That's why it's fun, right? That's why it's exciting.
That's sport. That's the excitement of sports.
Yeah.
Because the only thing is very annoying here in Brazil, it's because everyone just wants to know about soccer. And a long time ago, our soccer used to win everything. And because of this, everyone's like soccer here because we will win. Let me see my country win.
Yeah.
And now we don't have this, and because of this, the other sports are searched by the Brazilians because they want to see someone win easily. And the way Yanya used to win is the easily way. It's like, this is easy.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing though is like the Olympics is a whole different ball game in terms of nervousness, in terms of pressure, in terms of expectations. There's no no competitor. Yanya and whether you want to say Yanya or you want to say Che So, right? Whether it's somebody who's really experienced or someone who's relatively new, they're both equal going into the Olympics in the sense that none of them have any Olympic experience, and yet they all have a lifetime of knowing what what the Olympics means in terms of popular culture, and there's pressure there, and so we don't have any reason to necessarily believe that Yanya or anybody will buckle under that pressure, right? Yanya's performed flawlessly at something like the World Championships, which is certainly big in its own right. But it's like even the climbing World Championships, as big as that is, as important as that is, and as maybe as nervous as competitors get for that, that's nothing compared to the Olympics, right? The Olympics is this whole other stratosphere in terms of eyes that are going to be watching, potential pressure, stress, anxiety, all that stuff. So that's another X factor going into it. That just, you never know. You never know.
If you want, I can teach some kind of comparison to beat my argument about Nadia Comaneci.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, you heard about Lionel Messi.
Yep.
Lionel Messi is the best player soccer in the whole world. And plays for Argentina. It's a good team, Argentina always. But on every World Cup, Messi seems to get off. Get with a handbrake up. And probably can do the same with Yanya, because you never know.
Maybe, right? Like, I mean, maybe for whatever reason, I hate to keep thinking like we're picking on Yanya. It could be any other competitor, right? Any other competitor that you expect going into it will perform great. Who knows? Maybe that for whatever reason, like the Olympics just kind of gets in their head too much. And that's kind of their kryptonite. It's like, yeah, they're great in everything. They've done it all, but the Olympics.
Or fall in love with someone and get the superpower of love and win everything.
Well, and let's not forget that somebody like Adam Ondra, right? Like he didn't qualify in Hachioji, right? There was this whole controversy because he accidentally stepped on a bolt. It's like something so minor, but it makes such a huge difference. Now, he eventually did qualify, but what's to say that unfortunately something like that could happen again not for Ondra, but but some other competitor. And all of a sudden, like that, the Olympic dream is gone again, just like in a fall in speed climbing. It's gone in the blink of an eye. You accidentally step on a bolt or something like that. and that's the big difference maker. So so anybody who says that they're certain that somebody is going to do well in the Olympics or something like that, don't listen to them.
Yes, you are right. And on the next week, I think will be, or in 2 weeks or 10 days, I don't know, this month, with the 2 on the row weekends, we will have the World Cup from IFC on Salt Lake City. We will be there for curving there, for make your
Yes, I will. I will be in attendance there.
How are your expectations about, because this will be almost the thermometer for the Olympics. How are your expectation to be there?
My expectations are not necessarily pertaining to the Olympics, because I think that you would be, I don't think you want to draw too much or try to extrapolate too much about the Olympics from these World Cups, these Meiringen and now the Salt Lake City World Cups. I don't think that you can necessarily garner that much information from it. Now, certainly in very broad strokes, if somebody that's an Olympian looks absolutely, bad for whatever reason at these World Cups, like something is really wrong, then maybe that's an indicator that they might have some trouble in the Olympics. But on these World Cups, the Olympians are not training to peak at these World Cup events that are preceding the Olympics. And also, if you look at, I jotted down before we talked here, I wrote down the finalists for the Meiringen World Cup that we just had, right, a couple weeks ago. Of the men and women at Meiringen who made the finals in the men's and women's division, out of 12 of them, only 4 of them were Olympians, right? Janja Garnbret and Akio Noguchi in the women's division, and then Adam Ondra and Nathaniel Coleman in the men's division. Everybody else that was in the finals at Meiringen wasn't an Olympic qualifier. So that just goes to show you that it doesn't necessarily mean that like all the Olympians are going to be the finalists for these World Cups or anything like that. So I just wanted to point that out, that I don't know if you can necessarily gain that much insight about the Olympics from these World Cups.
Understood. And just curiosity of mine, why the best climbers on competition and the climbing training center, it is there on Utah and Colorado? What kind of water there exists there, or what kind of philosophy of the persons there that makes the center of the climb community there on Colorado and Utah?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think Colorado, when USA Climbing, for people who might not know, USA Climbing used to be headquartered in Boulder, Colorado. And it recently, just a couple years ago, it moved to Salt Lake City, Utah. I think both are kind of logical in the sense that there is Olympic or there's mountain climbing heritage in both of those cities, right? There's mountain ranges, and so climbing culture is very significant in both of those cities. I think in the case of Salt Lake City, there are a number of other national governing bodies of Olympic sports that are based in Salt Lake City as well. Like I'm off the top of my head, I think maybe like speed skating and maybe skiing or something is headquartered in Salt Lake City as well. So it kind of makes sense in that regard. There, it's like there are a number of Olympic sports that are headquartered there. But in terms of why they chose Salt Lake City once they moved out of Boulder, I'm other than that, I'm not really sure. That's a good question. I can ask them next time when I'm in Salt Lake City, if I see anybody.
I'm just curious because I think it's 2 athletes is from there, from Colorado. The young one Colorado, was 17, and the daughter from the owner from.
Brooke Rabatou and Colin Duffy, and they actually are part of the same team. They both come from Team ABC, which is the competitive climbing team that's one of the teams that's based there in Boulder. Which, I mean, that Team ABC is just a really historic, really important team. They were founded by Robin Erbisfield, Brooke's mother, who was also a really successful competitive climber in her own right. I mean, legendary competition climber. So, so it's not so much surprising necessarily that Robin, as a coach, would produce Olympians. It is just kind of interesting that they both happen to be in Boulder there.
Yes, and I would make the same question I did with Tyler. The Olympicans, the climbers that classified for Olympic, they are portrayed on the sport news or the cable TV because they classified for the Olympics, or they stay unknown, like nobody knows even the climbing is sport on Olympic?
It's probably somewhere in between, to be honest. Like they don't have, most of the climbers, they don't have the profile of, say a famous, I don't know, like a famous, like Tom Brady or somebody, like American football player, right? Like they don't have that kind of recognition. Again, because the GOAT. Right. But again, I think a lot of that has to do with, part of the reason is because those big media outlets don't necessarily cover competition climbing. But at the same time, they have been doing a lot of, the American Olympian climbers have been doing a lot of press, particularly in the last 2-3 months. They've been doing a lot of promotion and press for the Olympics. So I think people that are really interested in the Olympics and kind of following the Olympics, they would be able to kind of recognize the names of the climbers and whatnot. And I definitely think all 4 of the American Olympians, their profile has increased since they became Olympians. I mean, it's like they've been profiled by, magazines that are not climbing magazines at all. They've been mentioned in the New York Times and kind of all these places that otherwise probably wouldn't mention competition climbing, precisely because they did qualify for the Olympics. So I would say the star power has risen for all of them, but it's not quite to the level of like a football player or a basketball player or something like that. Yes. Not yet.
I think even the soccer players from Brazil is not portrayed like the NBA players, and you just choose the GOAT, but the players from American football.
Yeah.
And you was on the Pan American on last year, right?
I was.
And
yes.
How you saw it, or how you analyze it, the evolution from Latin America athletes on that game, because few get on the finals, but some names like the Argentina one, Valentina Aguado, and the Chilean one, Alejandra Contreras.
Sure.
And the Brazilian one, I think it's Cesar Grosso, get the finals. How you saw it, if I miss someone, please forgive me. And how you see the evolution of the amount of athletes from here on Latin America?
Oh, it was awesome. I had such a great time watching all the competitors from Latin America at the Pan Ams. I actually went back and I rewatched the bouldering portion of the Pan Ams in hopes that I would see a lot of those same names at the Salt Lake City World Cups. Now, unfortunately, once I kind of checked, it doesn't seem like a lot of the competitors who did well, the competitors from South America and Latin America who did well at the Pan Ams, not a lot of them are going to be in attendance at the Salt Lake City World Cups, at least not yet, as I look at the registrations. But, I wrote down after the bouldering, Andrea Rojas was in second place.
Andrea Rojas. Sí.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry about my pronunciation.
Yeah.
But
my English is not so well. Also.
She was in second place after the bouldering at the Pan Ams. Alejandra Contreras was in third place. And actually, I think Alejandra had more tops than Andrea Rojas at the bouldering of the Pan Am. She had 2 tops, and Valentina Aguado was in 4th place. So Latin America was 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place heading out of the bouldering portion at the Pan Americans in the women's division, and in the men's division, Carlos Granja was he was in 5th place in the men's division, and he's actually, I think, signed up to be at Salt Lake City in the 2nd World Cup in Salt Lake City from Ecuador. Danny Valencia was in 6th place, right behind him in the bouldering portion. Cesar Grasso and Jose Ramon Bull was in 8th. So it was like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th was all Latin America. So yeah, it was a great showing for the Latin American competitors there at the Pan American Games. Unfortunately, I wish more of them, were able to attend the Salt Lake City World Cup. I know obviously it's not up to them, their travel restrictions and whatnot, but
yes,
I would have loved to see him compete in Salt Lake City.
The good idea it's do some kind of World Cup on New York, and you can go there and get vaccinated also.
Yeah, I just hope that at some point, down the road, when the world is kind of back to normal, we can get all those South Americans who were at the Pan Ams, we can get them, on the World Cup circuit competing and climbing again, because it was great to see them. And I know from talking to a lot of the American competitors that were there at the Pan American Championships, a lot of the American competitors really enjoy competing against the Latin American competitors. I know that a lot of them are kind of friends, and there's a real camaraderie there. So I know that the Team USA competitors themselves would love to have the Latin American competitors back on the circuit too.
Yes, because it's just your opponent. It's not your enemy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they'll be training together, right before the competition starts. They'll be chatting and training together. And then when the competition starts, obviously you have to compete against each other. But then as soon as it's over, you're back to being friends. So,
yes. And the same question from Tyler is for you also. Do you love or do you hate the speed climbing, and why?
I really like it. I don't know if I'd say I love it in the sense that, if I have a choice between watching a speed climbing event or bouldering or lead climbing, I probably wouldn't choose speed climbing. Although I agree with Tyler, to see a speed climbing competition live is it's hard to beat that excitement when it's a neck and neck, race. There's really nothing like it in climbing, to watch kind of an exciting moment like that. So yeah, I'm a fan of speed climbing. Certainly. I kind of, like Tyler said, I used to not be a fan of it. But yeah. I've kind of, you too. Yeah. I've come around though. I enjoy it now. I certainly appreciate it. And I appreciate kind of the talent that goes into it, and the hard work and stuff. But yeah, I definitely like speed climbing. Yes.
And how you see the climbing on the next Olympic Games? Because we'll be on 3 years.
Yeah,
not
right.
Will be 4, will be 3 years. So probably, I hope, the things here on Earth will not change so dramatically like 10 years ago. So on 3 years, we have pretty much the same world we have right now, with streaming, with probably the same athletes, probably the same rules, but the format will be different. How you see the Paris 2024, climbing on Paris 2024?
Yeah, because I think
it'll be. Sorry, because the more short one, you can just answer with the Eiffel Tower. Period.
Right. I think it'll be really exciting, because I think since it is in Paris, Paris is it's the home of the UIAA, like the original governing body that oversaw competition climbing, that first sanctioned competition climbing events. The first organization ever to sanction big level international events was the UIAA in the late 80s. So there is just a real rich history with competition climbing, specifically in France, even to the point of, if you go back decades ago in there was an Winter Olympic Games that was in 1992 in Albertville, France. And at that time, there was hope that climbing would be included in those Winter Olympics as an exhibition. And a lot of people thought that climbing would be an exhibition sport at those Olympics, specifically because France has such a history with competition climbing. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I mean, I think climbing will be an even bigger deal in the Paris Olympics 3 years from now, given that kind of historic appreciation of competition climbing.
One thing we can watch over the time, it's the biopic of the climbers changed also on last years. First, they was always skinny, very skinny, to be light and everything else. And now you can see more stronger than before. It's not totally skinny, it's more stronger. You can see more muscles, you can see more power muscle on that competition. Why I'm asking this question for you, I don't know if you watched the light documentary about the eating disorders on climbing. So do you think this issue will haunting us all the time because some climbers get confused about be stronger than be lighter? Or do you think the price we have to pay is the eternal vigilance on kind of this kind of eating disorder?
I certainly hope it's not something that we're always having to deal with, right? I think, that being said, I think if you want to look at it kind of realistically, I think it is going to be a something that it's going to be hard to change, to eradicate that completely in the sport, because as much as there is good information and good educational materials out there for how to train, how to eat, all that stuff, as much as there's good advice out there about that, there's also always going to be bad advice, right? And some people are unfortunately going to maybe not find the right advice or not find the right education materials and stuff like that. So it's definitely a big thing. I don't think anybody would think it's going to be something that's going to be completely done away with and resolved anytime soon, because frankly, it's been an issue in the sport for a long time. Now, the fact that it is getting so much kind of attention and press right now with that, the documentary, the Light documentary, and there's been some great articles that have been written about eating disorders, climbers kind of telling their personal stories of those challenges and those battles with eating disorders and stuff. I think that's great because that just adds to the conversation and adds to the hope that more people will discover those materials and kind of learn from them. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of a your question is kind of it's kind of like, well, do you want to look at it optimistically or sort of pessimistically, yes, right? And so I think you and I would probably agree that the preference is to look at it optimistically, right? But we'll see. It's definitely it's a hard battle. It's definitely something that I'm glad is getting a lot of attention right now.
Yes. Last week there's some kind of article on Climber Gym or Climber Gym or Rock and Ice, one of these magazines, trying to create some kind of protocol for cheering on climbing competition. Why I'm asking this? Well, the difference between persons cheering on North America, yeah, and person cheering on Latin America. We are very passionate. We have to scream. We have to curse the person and everything else. Do you really think this kind of protocol to be more like tennis on climbing competition, or be more soccer on Brazil or Argentina that we sing all the time, we cheering all the time, screaming to that climbers trying to solve some kind of line on boulder or a route on leading?
That's a fun question. I should say I didn't read the article, so I don't know the sort of the logic or the arguments for or against. I don't know what arguments were presented for or against the different types of cheering, but and obviously you can see the value of somebody who says, you know, like, oh, it should be completely quiet, right? There's obviously like that makes sense, and there's a reason that tennis players prefer that. I love tennis. I love to watch tennis, and so I'm very aware of like that kind of fan type of cheering culture where you just kind of sit quietly and you don't even talk like while the point is happening. But having not read the article, I'll just say, I mean, I love cheering, you know, loud crowds and, you know, cheering loudly. That's part of the fun of fandom for me. Now, I don't know if I'd say I wouldn't advocate like cursing or, you know, cursing the athletes or anything like that. I don't know if I would go that far, but I certainly love just like a rowdy, loud crowd at a sporting event. It's great. And if crowds would be that loud and sort of energetic at a climbing competition, I think it'd be really fun.
Yes. Well, for you and the person who wrote the article on youth Olympic Games on Argentina, everyone was quiet, just talking, yeah. but were quiet. Meanwhile, the person was trying to solve the boulder problem there. So, well, will not be like football.
This kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the difference between outdoor climbing and competition climbing, right? In the sense that yes. if you are a high level climber, professional climber, and you want to make a video of yourself climbing a really hard outdoor route, then you can choose a time to go there outdoors when the conditions are perfect, and you can go there at a time when there aren't many people there, and you can have it be absolutely quiet. Right. That's fine. That's great. But it'd be great if competition climbing, to further distinguish itself and differentiate itself from outdoor climbing, maybe competition climbing is when the cheering and the crowd is really loud and kind of just going wild, because that would be something that is totally different from how it usually is outdoors, right? Another reason outdoor climbing, you want to be quiet because you want to be respectful of nature and stuff like that, right? You don't want to be loud outdoors. It's not a responsible ethic from an environmental point of view. So why not do it indoors? Why not take all the screaming and kind of the crowd energy, take it indoors? I think that'd be great to have that as a further way of separating competition climbing from outdoor climbing.
Yes, I agree. John, we are closing to the final. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, I don't know, talk more about climbing business, invite you more, or for everyone who are watching this right now, this live right now, John Burgman is interesting to came here to South America to make some kind of several articles about the climbing business scene on Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, and everything. Well, so get in touch with John Burgman, because he's as you can see, he's a very nice guy, and it's a very interested on your business on the climbing scene. So from South America, get in touch with him. John, if someone from here on South America or Latin America, Mexico, Guatemala, cualquier lugar, how the person can be in touch with you, communicate, exchange information, invite you to come here to make several articles? What are your social media and other ways to get in touch with you?
Yeah, probably the two easiest ways are I'm on Instagram, which is @JBClimbs. That's my Instagram handle, and they can find me there. They're welcome to send me a direct message if they want to get in touch. There it is. Yep. And another way, I have a website, which is www.johnburgman.net, and they can read my writing there, and then there's also a way that there's a contact tab where they can go to find my email address, and they can send me an email too. I always love hearing from fans of competition climbing in South America, or climbing gym owners and operators, managers, route setters in South America, anything like that. So yeah, people are welcome to reach out, and be happy to talk with them.
Of course. One last question I reserve to the final. Do you have any message? Because we are a very difficult year, all years, and in the case of Brazil, it seems we are living on the Groundhog Day from that comedy from the 90s, Groundhog Day. We are living the same day ever and ever and ever. It's like 2020 is not finished yet, at least from Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any message for hope, for how to handle on especially the climbing gyms and the climbing walls here on Latin America? Do you have any messages for how to stand still and I don't know, manage all the losses about money, about clients on this pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be sympathetic to anybody that's owning a business. I know it's been hard. And I know it's still hard. I think part of the comfort is what you just said. Like, even though it feels like Groundhog Day to all of us, it does for everybody, right? Like, we are all going through this same thing. There's kind of that sense of community there in a strange way. Everybody can relate to any sort of frustrations, or just like whatever it is, loneliness, anguish about this pandemic. And so there's kind of some comfort in the fact that we're all going through this together, quite literally. In terms of the gyms themselves, I would just say, I hope that gyms can find comfort in the fact that people have really, really missed climbing and being able to go climb. I think for a lot of people, this pandemic, when they didn't have access to a gym regularly, for a lot of people, the gym is their social center, it's their community center, right? It's their where they see their friends. People didn't have that. They really miss it, and they really want to climb. So I think when the gyms do finally open, in any country where they might still be closed, I really think people are going to come back in large numbers, because people really miss climbing. And I think that that's interesting to note, that that's as true in the United States as it is in Brazil, as it is in Canada, where Tyler was from, is from. Everybody misses climbing, and everybody really wants to go back to start climbing again.
Yes, that's true. John, thank you very much. Stay safe there. I hope we can get together in the next year on the Outdoor Retailer.
Yeah.
I'll do my best to go to 2022 on Outdoor Retailer on Denver, and we can get together, drink a beer, and talk a lot of shenanigans. And just remember that pandemic of COVID was on the past and become a joke and everything else.
Yeah, thanks, Lucho. It's always good to see you. I always enjoy our conversations, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's a real honor to be on your show.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.